I'm going to move into the session around looking at the relationship with authority and power in terms of the changes we're trying to make in our organisation. When we're looking at the different levers, if you like, for change in the system, one of those is always looking at what needs to shift around how we've set up our organisations in relation to power. That we may have actually had a governance structure or a power structure which suited the time of when the organisation was there or when the sector was there, but is that still working given the nature of the challenges we face today, but also our current reality? And I find usually that when we talk about this, and there's some nice framing starting to emerge in this space around getting power intelligence, that, you know, we talk about emotional intelligence and social intelligence, but the more literate we get about being able to, first of all, diagnose what's happening around power, but also then work with it in a different way, the more we can kind of start to surface some of the dynamics which are actually underneath a lot of the challenges we face. So I want to just recap some of the stuff we talked about at the last session, which I introduced briefly, which was talking about the difference between authority and leadership. When do we need to exercise authority and when do we need to exercise leadership? So I'm just going to go over quickly what we talked about, that if we think about authority as something which is a position that is very, it's a very transactional thing, that you will be authorised in the roles that you are in to basically provide three core functions to maintain the system that you're in. And these are providing direction. Where are we going? What's our direction? What's our purpose? What's our ultimate goal? Protection, which is, will we be safe to be able to do that? You know, that the higher up you are, your role is to protect the rest of the system from any external threats so that everyone else can get on and do the job that it was set up for. And the third one is order, that we've got to do things in a particular way that the system works so we get there. So we open on time, we've got processes, we've got procedures, and we follow those for the types of challenges where we know what to do. Now, I can't emphasize enough how hardwired this notion of authority is. You know, we were born with this. Our first authority figures, if we had them, were our parents, who were able to provide those core things about how to get food, that you get fed at regular times, and that you feel safe. And you know, we know what happens when these functions are not in place. So we then leave our families, we go to school, you know, we authorise as parents our schools to take up this function. And then we leave, we go into the workplace, we're in organisations, and again, we are always authorising other people to hold this function, that systems cannot exist without this. So, you know, and I may have said this the last time, that I think a lot of the challenges we face are when we're not actually taking up this role. That authority, those systems are not in place, there's not sufficient direction, there's not sufficient protection, there's not sufficient order. You know, in our communities and the challenges we face, it's when there's a breakdown in this. So it's not either or. I think it's really important to emphasise we absolutely have to have this type of authority to keep our systems running. But really the core function of authority is to maintain the system. It's not to change it. It's really about making sure it works well and it works effectively. And this is what we get rewarded to do all the time. So I want to just hold this distinction, and, you know, we talk about renting this idea that authority and leadership are different. Yeah, I'm not selling you this, it's just hold it up to the light in relation to the challenge you're facing and see if it fits. So when we're talking about exercising leadership then we're talking about how do we work in the system in a way which gets us to examine our current reality and perhaps change it or tweak it. That actually leadership's about helping systems face new realities where the traditional ways of providing direction, order and protection may not be working. They're not helping the system adapt. So we think about this then as it's an activity then that everybody can do regardless of the role or rank or position of authority that you have. And really the purpose of that is getting people to face the reality, to lean in and explore, as we've been talking about this morning, that how do we help our systems adapt to address these challenges? And what we're trying to do is get people to tackle the problems that are helping reinforce status quo. So we've got to have common responsibility to work together towards doing that, as opposed to maintaining what we've currently got. Apart from where, it's looking at that through a lens of scrutiny. What about what we're currently doing is working, but what might we need to shift? And as we spoke about on the last day, that this will usually involve loss of some type. That's something, we can't keep doing everything the way we've done it, so we've got to let go of something. And fundamentally, we need to have a holding environment that enables us to learn into this. That we can't really learn into what the adaptive leadership work is when we're trying to maintain systems. So what we talk about here then is this function of authority, which is really core for any challenge, that when it's a technical challenge that we're facing, the work of someone in a role of authority is to define the problem and define the solution. Yeah, that's when it's a simple or a complicated challenge, that we know what to do and there is a predetermined solution to it. But when it's an adaptive or complex challenge, the role of authority is quite different, because we don't know what the problem is and we don't have the solutions. So the work is to define the challenge, help the system diagnose what's going on, and start to generate questions which can help us actually generate new solutions. So they will help take us into more areas where we can start to get a better handle on the type and the nature of the challenge we're facing. That's pretty much all you can do around providing direction. So we can see there's a direct tension in both. When you are being authorized to provide problem definition and solution, and then we're in complex problems, it's like, well, we actually don't know what to do here. And people are looking to you and you're rewarded to do that. So with the function of protection, usually your role as authority is to try and protect the system from more external threats around funding, security. It's very hard for people to keep systems running when they're constantly thinking about, am I going to have a job next week? Or, the nature of the challenges we're facing. So your role is often to protect the rest of the system from any type of threat. That you can manage that's your job. You've got to scan that horizon, but the rest of the system has got to get on and do what they're there to do. But when it's an adaptive or complex challenge, actually we want people to face reality. We want to lean into the reality so we can look at the whole system and go, okay, so what are the different levers we might need to work on? So the work there is disclosing that threat, that making people aware of what we're facing. Now again, and someone talked this morning about pacing. How do we do that at a rate that a system can tolerate and bear so we can still get on and do the technical work? And the third area around order. So order is often people come in and they know what their role is. And we know the role of the organization, we know why we're here. Again, it's really important to do that in technical work. And the role of authority is to do that. Yeah, we've got lots of very well-defined systems for that. But again, it can be a hindrance in adaptive work when we might not know the different roles that we need. We may need roles that we actually currently don't have in our system, and we need different skills. So, because we don't know the nature of the challenge or how we're going to address it. So part of authority's role might be to hold off on actually embedding those roles too quickly and even disorient them. So rather than people go, well, this is my area and this is my job description, this is what I'm here for. It's like, okay, well, actually for this type of challenge, let's get rid of that and let's figure out what's needed. And straight away we can see how disruptive that is. Yeah, when we're very used to coming in and be very clear on what we're doing. The other part to this around order is controlling conflict. Yeah, and this is a big thing in collaboration, is that, of course, if we've got collaboration, we're going to have conflict, because really it's just difference. And we want different views in collaboration. Now, in technical work and running systems, your job is to restore order. We manage conflict. Yeah, we manage it away usually because we can't have people arguing about stuff when you want people to follow processes and procedures. Now, with an adaptive or complex challenge, we actually want to expose that conflict. We want to bring out the different views or seek them, because if we don't do that, it means that we're actually just getting groupthink. We're bringing the same views together all the time to try and solve the problems that we're in. And that's really agreement. We're looking for agreement on technical issues. Adaptive issues, we're looking for the contradictions or the conflict, because that's actually where the opportunity is to innovate. So there's a real tension there between how do you expose the conflict and the difference or let it emerge, when people might be looking to you to be the one that, when things get uncomfortable, to step in and restore order. And the final one is around maintaining norms. Yeah, these are all in order, that the norms of your system, the institutions, to go back to this morning, which have got certain cultures, practices, ways of doing things. That's often what we're doing. We let people know this is how we do things around here, because we think that's what helps us actually get the outcomes we're getting. When we're adapting or we're trying to address that complexity, we've actually got to challenge those norms or allow them to be held up to scrutiny, so we can go, well, what aspects of our culture or structures or ways of working are not going to equip us for the type of challenge we're facing now, that we might have to do things differently. And this is called, so this balancing act between doing the technical work, because actually that's going to give you money in the bank. The more outcomes and progress you get here will get money in the bank for when you need to do the adaptive work, because what you're doing is failing expectations. People are bringing you into the role to do the technical work, but actually you're also going to have to do the adaptive work on the complex challenge, and you will fail the system's expectations straight away. So this is often called, so in adaptive leadership, it's called, dancing on the razor's edge. Yeah, so we should just have a big razor down the middle of there, because if you keep people in this adaptive space too long, because it's highly uncomfortable to be challenging our norms, allowing conflict, then you can very quickly be deauthorized. So being able to kind of experiment, try things, then go back to when do we need to now focus on the technical work, is how we stay alive in leadership. But it helps you see why we avoid a lot of the adaptive work, because it's in direct tension with often why we're employed and what systems expect of us. I want to just come to the bit about, so while you might be in a role of authority, how we then work with the fact that there's different levels of power and rank playing out all the time is a really core part of the work. And a useful way to think about this is understanding the difference between positional power, formal power, i.e. authority, and personal power and informal power, and how that's playing out is really core. So we're going to go in and unpack that a bit more. Now, this comes from process work, psychology, the work of Arnie Mindell, who looks, if people want to go into this in any more detail, who provides different lenses on how you look at it. But I think the key thing to remember is that this is really fluid. Linda, you spoke to that earlier, that we've got to know what resources and privileges does our positional power bring us, but where are the edges of that? Because, if we go back to the adaptive work, we absolutely know how much authority we've got to do the technical work, because when it comes to the adaptive work, we're going to need it. We're going to need to have that authority. We want to be expanding our authority all the time by doing this well, because when we take people in our organizations into a more adaptive space, they're going to be looking to us to fulfill this role. So if you've not got authority on this side, it's really hard to do the adaptive work. So again, someone said in the check-in, we realized that the people we were asking to engage didn't have the power to do that. Whether that was formal or informal, this lens might help us be able to diagnose that. So I'm just going to run through these different types of it, and those of you who've read the readings will have an insight into that, but then I want to get you to do some work on it. So the core ways we look at this is around thinking about your positional rank. And the key thing here is we're talking about rank in relation to other people. So if I'm in a room by myself, I have absolutely no power, basically. It's just in relation to me, yeah? But as soon as someone else comes into the room, immediately, and we're doing this all the time, we're engaging from different positions of power depending on where we are. So this comes from the particular position you hold in that system. That straight away you know certain people have got access to resources, people, power, purely because of your title. Yeah, so I want you to think about, as you're looking at this, what is it that your position, what rank does your position give you in terms of, can you hire and fire people? Can you make decisions over resources? Can you direct that flow? Can you change strategy? The reason this is really important is as soon as we move out into another system, it's going to shift. It will not have that same currency there. It'll have a different currency. And again, we need to understand what that is. And then we have social rank, or as process work calls it, unearned rank. So this is power that we did nothing to actually get it. It's rank we have that we're born into. It's gender, culture, class, often, sexual orientation, a whole range of areas here that are social, but which are playing out all the time. And in the field you're in, you'll be very across all this, but it's playing out again all the time in the daily politics of the work that we're doing. So being conscious of that, about what social rank you have, whether you feel it was earned or unearned, is really important. The part around this that plays out often in collaboration is that we often underestimate our own rank and way overestimate other people's. So particularly when it comes to social rank. So we can use, if we're going in to do a negotiation or engage with different stakeholders, if we feel we've got less rank, we can use way too much firepower to try and get our point across, because we may have positional rank, but we may have less social rank. Yeah. So if I think of my own leadership work in this space, I've worked predominantly in a lot of male-dominated systems, but I grew up in a family with all men. I don't have any sisters. There was, apart from my mum, was the only female, and I was acutely aware when I started to then work in contexts where I was often the only woman in it, where I felt, and it's often a very visceral feeling, where you feel you've got less rank or less power in that room. And so the way that I would show up was from a position of feeling like I had less power, when in fact the positions that I was holding at the time held a lot of power and influence with them, but I had no consciousness of that. So the way that we go in, and this is where the awareness we have of our own power, but how we're perceived by others, is really important. But we've got to know what our triggers are. Where do we feel most vulnerable, or where do we have an Achilles heel around some of our power? And then the second area is around personal or psychological rank. And this comes from life experience. It comes from your connections, from the knowledge that you've brought up, your expertise, which it doesn't matter what role you're in, you take this with you. So going in and out of different systems, you're always taking your more informal rank with you. And in the work of collaboration or working externally, this is actually where you've got far more leverage to get things done, because your positional power may not have as much influence or leverage. And a way of thinking about this is, how do you leave people? When you've been engaging with people, their perception of you, are they going to come back and engage further? Are they going to come back for repeat business? Is often how we're showing up. Now, this can take a form of connection to the issue, people having lived experience of an issue, which explains, why in a lot of work in different cultures, people from that culture have far more personal rank or spiritual rank, which is that they're connected to the issue or to a kind of a sense of something greater. So a lot of the work that I do in this leadership space is in Indigenous, working across non-Indigenous culture. And this is where, you know, not understanding the rank you've got can get you into trouble. So I've often gone in with high positional rank, and as a white woman, fairly high social rank, but feeling immediately outranked in an Aboriginal community, or, you know, other contexts I've worked in where it's all people with lived experience, and I'm on the outer going in to enable or help, that you feel absolutely powerless. That's inflaming for people who've got less rank, because all they can see is you're coming in from this organisation, you've got this whole institution behind you, and you've got all this power and influence. And we often feel a wee bit disabled, so nobody's able to really take up the role. Yeah, we end up in a fairly inflammatory situation. So the fluidity of this is, I think, the key is knowing when are we moving from one context to the other, and what signals are we getting. And I'm just going to jump to here. What signals are we getting about how others experience or perceive our power? Because there's your sense of power, and then there's how you use it, but it's all related to how others perceive it. And in a way, it doesn't matter how you think you use your power if others experience you in a completely different way, and you're trying to influence or collaborate. That's the most important one. We've got to be really tuned into what signals are we getting. You know, people don't talk about power. We don't talk about this very often. So this is the kind of, it's another lens, if you like, to look on the work that you're doing or your challenge, to go, what part is this playing? And just to jump back, the positional power gives us license to act. Yeah, you can hire, fire, you can make decisions, but it's actually when we are engaging then in complexity that will get us so far. Then our personal power gives us capacity. We'll be relying far more on that type of influence to bring people along over whom we cannot delegate, that we can't order, we can't edict. So it's a bit of a dance between the two. We've always got power, but it takes us into this territory around, are we power over, or how are we using it? I think the thing to be reflecting on is when we don't understand the power we've got, we can risk abusing it or misusing or neglecting, because we're not using the resources we've got. And all power is a resource at our disposal to be able to act on behalf of our purpose. So it's not about power over, it's about how we use what we have at our disposal. And if we don't use it, what are the implications of that? But to do that, we first of all got to be aware that we've got it. And this is where it is a very, you know, I'd say it's a very kind of deep practice to get into, about building our muscle to think about our power differently, but also to seek feedback on it. Because we've all got blind spots around power, particularly the psychological part. And that's often where other people can help you see actually what people come to you for, is a really good way to think about it. What do people use you for? Your family, your friends, that's a resource, it's a power.